Whenever you'd like to get started.
Marty. Press record. Visibility. Unable to establish. Marty, you can recognize anything she says? Oh. We talked to have spouse.
I recognize.
We're having technical difficulties.
I sent a message with that. No, I told I'm in person. It's time for our business. You told who in person? Your husband. Oh, never do that. He doesn't talk to me.
I said, don't give Bill messages.
Yeah. Are we ready? I can't hear a word you're saying.
Okay, I'm gonna start. First of all, I'm so impressed that everybody came out. Thank you. So many of you that are so dear to me in this room. I can't even begin to tell you. It's like, I feel like I just dove right into heaven. And thank you for, I'm just so happy. So I'm gonna start. I took notes because I can't remember anything. I have black holes in my head. But basically, I'm first generation American, Jewish American. And the reason I'm first generation Jewish American is because my parents came from Russia and Ukraine. My mother came from Ukraine, and she came from a town that was about 200 families, kind of like half of what we are here. And what happened was the Cossacks, who were the Russian army, came in while my mother was babysitting for her baby sister, who was 2 years old, sitting in the high chair. The Cossacks just came in and just started shooting all over. And they killed the baby right in front of my mother.
Oh.
Then they asked my grandfather to join the army because any able man was supposed to join the army. Well, he didn't want to kill Jews. Oh, I have the chills. What he did was he took his own eye out so he could be blinded and not have to fight.
Wow.
So that gave me huge courage and strength for a person to have to do that to themselves so they can go on living and protect other people from living. So that was tremendous for me. My father came from Belarus, which was in Russia also. And he had to leave when he was very young, and they threw him in steerage, which is at the bottom of the boat. And he can't even look at the ocean. I mean, he couldn't for years.
Recording in progress.
Oh, I'm zooming. So that was the background. They came here. My father had a 6th grade education, did not speak any English, and my mother as well. They both learned English and learned to read and write and do everything. Well, my father read the newspaper from cover to cover every day. And he found a little blurb when he was like around 20 that they were selling apartment buildings for back taxes. And he was always a worker and always a saver. So he saved his money. He was able to buy his first apartment building for pennies on the dollar. Then he kept going. It was phenomenal. So I remember when I was a little girl, he used to come in, my feet didn't even touch the ground, but he used to come in with floor plans. And I used to love walking through the floor plans. And my bailiwick is architecture, so that's where I got it from. My mother was an amazing woman who was, all these people that I love keep walking in this room. My mother was a naturalist. She was the first Martha Stewart. She would never throw anything away, no matter what. In fact, for her 100th birthday, I got her a card. It said, 100 is the new 90. Live it up, throw the card away. Anyway, she was really into health foods and macrobiotics. When I was a kid and I had a headache, she would say, press on your thumb. And sure enough, the headache would go away. So I come from amazing, wonderful, loving people that are devoted. And I have 2 sisters. One is a dancer and the other one was a singer. And so in my family, we just used to sing and dance and put on skits. We just had the best time. We entertained each other. So we really grew tight as a family, always. I never remember us not being tight. So that was really great. Then I grew up in the 50s. Oh, I was born 1945. And I think I have a cheerful personality because World War II ended 2 weeks after I was born. And everybody was happy. So I think that really gave me impetus to feel good about myself. So in the 50s, excuse me, I lived in an apartment building. Marty lived right across the street from me, actually, my husband, Marty. And what happened was there were so many families in each apartment building. Like my apartment building had eight apartments on the floor. There were 6 floors and there were 4 sections to the building. And it all went up, that whole neighborhood went up in the Art Deco era in the early 30s. And so all the families had 1, 2, and 3 kids. So we played in the streets. It was phenomenal. You go downstairs, there are like a bazillion kids and everybody knew everybody because it was also, the neighborhood was cut off. It was called Pelham Parkway in the Bronx. And it was cut off by the New York Botanical Gardens, the zoo, a parkway, and then a big area. The Italian neighborhood was like across way over there. So it was mostly a Jewish neighborhood. Excuse me. I think what happened was all these people, many people came from Eastern Europe they had to flee because they were being killed and chased. So the neighborhood was almost like what they call a shtetl, which is like a small village. So it became like the people from Russia and Ukraine were all living in that little neighborhood. So we all knew everybody. In fact, Marty's mother, I remember his mother, because she was the shortest woman I ever met in my life. I was about 8 years old and I saw eye to eye, and she was an adult. I was amazed. So I remember her.
I do too.
Okay, and Marty and I hung out in high school in the same crowd together. He had a crush on my best friend. It's funny. Oh, and then my parents were kosher biosher, like strict. And one time, a friend of mine's parents took me out on the avenue for lunch. And they bought me this food and I went, oh my God, what is that? And they said, it's bacon. And I thought, I'm still here. But what happened was a significant occurrence happened. It turns out I realized I'm different than my parents. For the first time in my life, I was my own self. And I was 8 years old. So that was an amazing thing. Well, then skipping to the 60s, 1964, I got married to Alan Goodman. He was actually a brilliant artist. He was a creative director on Madison Avenue. So I was one of those Madison Avenue wives. He would hire Richard Avedon. He would go to Ford modeling agency and hire people, and then he would come home to me. So that always blew my mind. But he was so good. He designed the Ralph Lauren logo. He took me out of the Bronx and lifted me into elegance, and I really learned a whole other level. It was absolutely fantastic. So he and I lived in Forest Hills, right by the tennis stadium, fancy schmancy. And then I got pregnant. I had my daughter, Jennifer, and I had her in the hospital. And when I gave birth, they took her away from me. And I said, give my baby to me. And they said, no, we have to clean her up. I said, give me my baby. I want to check her out. I want to hold her and be with her. They would not let me. And I started freaking out and screaming. And they said to me, we're gonna put you in the mental ward if you keep this up. And I swore to myself I would never give birth in the hospital again. It was the most horrific experience. I know, it was terrible. But anyway, she made it and I made it. My husband and I divorced, but that's but so I'm sitting in Forest Hills in this fancy schmancy apartment with my wonderful, successful husband, my baby on my knee. And I said to myself, Cinderella, this is it. I said, this is it? This can't be it. I don't like this. It's not enough. Well, that was in 66. In 68, we had a home in Fire Island. So we went out to Fire Island and all that music started happening. And I started getting freer and relating and understand just the freedom. It was unbelievable to me. So I burned my bra. And that was like a release. That was just let it go, lady. It was really good. And so from there, I started, it represented freedom. So I started questioning authority for the first time, really, even though I got it when I was 8 years old. These are like little things along the way that really taught me to be true to myself. And that was amazing. So as soon as, and then we were marching against Vietnam, that whole thing, that was unbelievable. And I mean, I was talking about marching against the government I mean, this just amazing freedom I had, my own thinking was just fantastic. So we came home from Fire Island and I got divorced immediately. I just didn't want to be bound. And even though I had a baby, but she was like my puppy, you know, we always said she was funny. She's still funny. So she was entertaining and it was just great, her and me. One of the things that I really believe in is women need to be self-sufficient with money, and money is power. And I did not want to be beholden at all to my husband. So I didn't take a dime from him. So I moved out and I'm thinking, uh-oh. So I get a job. My first job was in this place called the Pussycat Lounge. Exactly. So I go there and I went at night. So my baby didn't know I was missing. I had my cousin babysit and everything. But you know what? Nobody came in. Nobody came into the Pussycat Lounge. And I realized it was a mafia front. So that was like my first experience. It was bizarre. And they gave me big tips. You know? But I left. I just couldn't do it. So after that, I realized, and I was smoking pot, you know, smoke pot in Fire Island, get loose in the 60s. So I'm smoking pot. And I realized I know all these people on Madison Avenue. So I started selling pot to Madison Avenue. I was making so much money. I would go. Sorry. I'm so glad I get it. So I would go in, I would put on a trench coat and I'd have an attaché. And I'd meet them in these small executive conference rooms. And I'd open up the attaché case and I used to sell nickel and dime bags, you know. And so I'd say 1 for a nickel, 2 for a quarter. And they would take 2 for a quarter. I mean, it was nuts. So after that, a friend of mine had a very tiny apartment. If anybody knows New York City, the apartments are tiny. I happened to have had some money, so I had a bigger apartment. Well, one of her friends came and she said, I don't have room for him to stay. Can he stay with you? So I said, sure. So he stayed with me and we befriended each other. And he said to me, if you ever are in Maui, come visit me. He said, just go to McKenna Beach, you'll find me. So I go to Maui with my little girl. She was 3 at the time. And he said, the only thing is bring a sleeping bag. So we had backpacks with sleeping bags. We go and I take a taxi and the road ends. And people know McKenna. So I get out of the cab. I said, where's the house? where is it? Where's the beach? And he said, just walk that way. I think we walked probably half a mile. I don't know how far it was. But we walked and walked and I'm starting to think, but there's McKenna Beach there. I'm heading there. So I go there and I asked for David and they said, oh, he just left, but his cave is empty. So I was in a cave with my little one. I don't know for how long, because I'm a be here now person. I don't really pay attention to time. Probably 2-3 months, something like that. But it was an experience. And the locals would come and they would get fish and then we would go into town once a week or so for provisions. It was amazing. But then my father had a stroke, so I had to go back to New York. So I go back to New York and I needed money. So a friend of mine from Fire Island had a store, a clothing store. So I got a job there. And then he decided to leave. And and it was so loose in those days. Excuse me. So he leaves, he said, you could have this store. So I was like, okay. I bought it for the inventory. But what was happening was there was a big change in clothing and all that. So I was the first unisex clothing store in New York. Then I started buying Levi jeans and fry boots for, well, the Levi jeans I bought for like $5 to $8 a pound. And fry boots, I had a boyfriend that kind of just gave them to me. And it was just unbelievable. And then I started getting into antique clothing because of the used Levi jeans. And I started selling to the people in the theater on Broadway. It was amazing. I was so lucky. And then, I would drop my daughter off. We moved down to Gramercy Park because that's where the store was. Gramercy Park's on 20th and my store was 19th. Well, if you move to a building in Gramercy Park, you get a key to the park. It's a private park. So I got the key to the park and I had a babysitter for my daughter. And every day I would lock them in the park. The park had bars on it. And I felt like it was jail. It was awful. It didn't feel right. But anyway, so a friend of mine came by the store all the time. And my daughter started playing with the rag lady. So I pulled her in the store and I just knew that I had to leave. So I got myself an atlas and I closed my eyes and I kept doing that. I kept landing in the Indian Ocean. Little did I know, half my friends went to India. But I said to myself, it's too far. So while I'm doing that, this guy comes in the store and he says to me, you know, on the way to my work and on the way back from work, I see you laughing and smiling. I said, I don't know. It must have been the end of the war. I have no idea. So he said, well, so we started dating. And then he said to me, what are you doing in New York? And I said, I really have to get out. He said, well, I have a place in Santa Cruz, California. So there I went. The day I landed in Santa Cruz, we landed at the Pacific Garden Mall. And I see a bunch of women marching and they're topless. So I go over to them and I said, what are you doing? They said, we're taking back our rights. And I said to my boyfriend, I said, I think I'm gonna like it. These people are free thinkers. So I stayed there. And then I opened a restaurant. I decided I need to do something. So I opened a restaurant. It was health food and, you know, soy burgers and hamburgers, everything. And it was, I picked that place because it was East Cliff Drive, which is where all the surfers were. And I figured, oh, they're cute. You know, that'd be a nice little, every day they come in my restaurant. So that was really great. And then my daughter actually, I had a boyfriend, another boyfriend, and he was a musician. And I got pregnant. And we split. I couldn't be with him. And I had the baby who was taking pictures right here. And I decided I'm not gonna have the baby in a hospital. It was awful. So, and it just so happened that there was a new midwife place that was opening. And so I was the second birth and I had all the midwives. I had 7 midwives. Somebody put up a big peyote tea, which I did not have. But it was really wild. It was amazing. I'm so glad that I had my baby at home. So anyway, I bought this restaurant, and because I had a second daughter, I said, and I smell like a greasy French fry for 2 years. So I decided to sell the restaurant and open a kids' clothing store. So I did that, And it was called Once Upon a Child. I had new and used clothing. And in the back room, I had a huge, it was a big store, and I had a huge room in the back. And I opened a free toy exchange. It reminds me of the little store that we have, the Breezeway, because I saw my kids were getting tired of their toys, or they outgrew them. So they just took one for one. It didn't matter how much it was or what. And it brought a lot of people into the store. It was really wonderful. So that was my store. Oh, and then Ram Dass was living there. So I got to meet Ram Dass and go to all of his talks. And that also, like, just my mind just kept getting bigger and more open and beautiful, and my own thoughts and freedom. And it was fantastic. Excuse me. So I bought my first house in 1974 for $23,500. It was amazing. And let me see. Oh, and at that point, I met my goddaughter's mother, who we wrote a will. She wrote a will and left her daughter to me. And I have her now because she had passed. So yeah, she's been with me forever. I was always her other mother forever.
And now saying here.
She's here.
That's me, yes.
And then, well, I had my store. I have a sister that's really, she was very religious, Jewish religious. She actually took classes at university and studied all the different religions, and realized her favorite one, the one she really related to, was Judaism. So she was steeped in Judaism, and to really go far, you can go to the Kabbalah, but you can only go to the Kabbalah if you're really steeped, if you really know what's going on. So she went to the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is the mysticism, and it has to do with numbers and letters. So I had my store. She says to me, put an F or an X up by the address. So I didn't want to exit out, so I put an F up. As soon as I did that, business tripled. And I'm not a hoodoo voodoo kind of person, but I'm like, ooh. So as soon as I did that, she said, you should change your name. Hence, I was born Ann Iris Rappaport. So I changed my name to Laurel Sinclair. Exactly. I mean, I felt it's a little too waspy for me. So I went the other way, and I made all my friends. I tried a name out a week. So from Laurel Sinclair, I wanted to go the other way. I was Mabel Chernievsky. From there, I started playing because I got a list of first names and last name. Then I was Feel Your Pain. Then I was Elephant. I thought, why not? But then I went to Michale Dancer, and I went immediately. I went back to school. I started school in New York for New York School of Interior Design. And then out here, I wanted to go for architecture because I just love it. So I went, and all because I changed my name. And I realized Michale is a really good name because they didn't know if I was a man or a woman. And architecture is really a man's field, or it was at that time. And it really helped me get through a lot in my life. But now I like the name Michaela, so please call me Michaela. Even though a lot of people know me as Michale, you can call me either way, as long as you call me. call me Annie. I was an Ann also. So anyway, I got my degree in, I went back for architecture, but it was a 6-year program. And I was a single mom and I just couldn't do it. So I got my degree in interior design, which was fine. And then, oops, I missed a page.
Was that in Santa Cruz?
That was, yeah, that was in Santa Cruz. Then I actually moved up to San Francisco to further my career. It was really time for me to get going. And somehow I missed something, but I want to tell you this because it's funny. When my mother heard I was marrying one of the Gelman boys, she said, "The doctor?" I said, "No." She said, "The hippie?" So it's my husband. Anyway, I moved to San Francisco, and my first job was a manager of a very high-end Italian showroom in the design center. And from there, I went to Macy's. They found me, they kind of found me. Everybody knows each other, it's a small profession. And they found me and they asked me to start a wholesale furniture division for them with a very high-end French line called Ligne Rosé. So I did that and I sold a lot to the high-tech industry because it was that kind of look. And then I was just getting bored. So they actually moved me to be director of interior design in San Francisco. So I was in a corner office, but there were 7 of us in there. And I'll tell you, we used to call it industrial strength interior design. There would be so many people, because if you buy a couch and you spend a certain amount of money, you get a free designer. And so I would have I would go to sleep at night thinking, I have Mrs. Jones' furniture mixed up with Mrs. Smith's fabric. And I would be afraid. It was nuts. And I just, I did what I had to. But then DuPont found me. And I started selling Corian, which was a building material. But they put me in the commercial venue. I was the only one in all of Northern California. So I wrote out a whole list of questions. How many people work in your firm? You know, I'm just trying to find my way. And I found out the top companies, which were great. So I had an expense account. I was working for DuPont. We went to the fanciest restaurants. I made friends with so many people. They heard about me. They wanted to have dinner and lunch. And I was like, expense account. So I had a great time. That was good. And then, but what happened was, since I was the only consultant in all of Northern California, I decided to put on seminars for entire counties. So I became a public speaker. I would talk in front of 200, 250 architects and designers at a time because it was just easier for me. I'm basically lazy. I say it once instead of 1,000. So it really worked. It was wonderful. But then I was working so hard. One of, I'm losing it here. I don't remember what I was going to say. I'm going to go on to something else. Marty and I got married. And we got married.
I want to hear how you connected.
How we connected? Okay. Marty and I knew each other from the Bronx. And we hung out as teenagers. And I knew his wife and I called her, I loved her. I called her my wife-in-law because she was fabulous. And so, we were all really close friends. And so he and I was living in San Francisco, he was living in Santa Barbara, and we were just calling each other all the time. Then we started meeting halfway, like in Big Sur, Cambria, and all these very romantic places. And so
With
we
the wife?
kind of got that.
What happened to the wife, they wanna know?
The wife died.
No, before.
No, that's my story.
Oh,
Yeah, have to wait till next
Well, when
They
happened-
broke up, the wife and Marty broke up.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
No, that's
I
okay.
don't also don't hear. So I have to keep talking so you don't. So, well, Marty and I got married. We got married 3 times within a few days. We got married by an American Indian named Grandfather Bearheart in a sweat lodge. We got married by Jack Cornfield in Spirit Rock. And then we got married in Tiburon, excuse me, at the Lyford House, which is, excuse me, the Audubon Society now. And we got married by a rabbi there. So we're solid, whether you like it or not.
I can.
Well, I have to tell you, I was working for DuPont at the time. And one day I came home and I was unpacking my car for my samples and stuff. And I started crying because there was a guy that came in, a new regime came in. And people get, like, one thing about DuPont that I learned also is that they're just people. And everybody's just eking out a living. It doesn't matter you're working a little company or a big company. We're all doing the same thing. We just need money to live because that's how it goes. So, but this new guy came in, new regime, and he was a drill instructor for the Marines. And I'm thinking, I don't relate at all. It was just not working. And he wanted to know after my full work day, every 15 minutes of the day, where I was, how much money I was making, things. It was gross. And Marty saw me across the street and I was crying and he sees me and he comes over to me. He says, come work for me. And he had this wonderful company and he'll tell you about it because he's talking next month.
I don't know if I want to follow.
All of a sudden, I became a product designer. So I was always very creative, but this really was wonderful. And so I created products that we sold to the Smithsonian. We were both in sales and 2 of us together, amazing. And we were both in sales and I was doing the designing. And so we sold to Smithsonian, to all the national parks, to all the museums, botanical gardens, Ralph Lauren, I designed some stuff for him. And I mean, just on and on. We've been in business. In fact, we have 1 client left. We came here and we retired, but this one client buys so much stuff that we couldn't turn her down. So we have 1 thing left, and that's about it. But I just want to thank everybody. I'm so appreciative for living here and everybody coming out and the play and all the parkettes, all the people that, HOL and friends from the Bronx and biography and friends and oh my God, I just, there's so many wonderful people here. I feel so blessed, truthfully, just blessed. So thank you for listening. I don't know how.